Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. Where to start? Only Tottenham could be quite good, yet produce two really stupid moments that mean they end up losing a match. Such a weird game to analyse. Honestly, the word weird and Tottenham Hotspur is almost synonymous, isn't it? There's so much to kind of delve into that game. And I mean, we'll just start off only because it's happened not long before I've started doing this video. But Champions League draw, AC Milan. That is loaded with narrative as well, isn't it? Obviously, you'll remember back to the game at the San Siro back in the Harry Redknapp days when, wasn't it, Aaron Lennon bursting up the pitch, squaring to Peter Crouch to score. Obviously, there's the Conte narrative going back to Milan, the San Siro. Obviously, the former Inter boss, he will know AC Milan very, very well, which obviously is a big plus for Tottenham. Of course, being the group winners, Spurs will play the first game away from home, then they'll play the second game back at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Although, obviously, after the last two results there, you might be wondering whether that is such an advantage, but hopefully it will be by then. We'll get back to it being a fortress again. But AC Milan, yeah, it's I like Milan. I do like Milan. As a city, I think it's lovely. So the fans will have a good time there, enjoy themselves, hopefully. And hopefully the result as well. But yeah, San Siro, it's an interesting stadium. It's one of those that's absolutely famous, iconic. It is one of those that obviously is a very old stadium, and you can feel that. And obviously, there's plans, isn't there, to I can't remember if it's redeveloping it or actually demolishing it and build a new one. There's definitely plans afoot to update it all there, but maybe this will be one of the last few occasions to actually get there and see the place. But yeah, so as draws go, it's one of those where Spurs are probably looking at it thinking, okay, that's winnable. And after watching a couple of recent games, AC Milan might be looking at it and thinking that's winnable. Obviously, standout ties, of course, Liverpool against Real Madrid. And City of Leipzig. City always seem to get German teams. I don't know if that's just me, or maybe it's because they play so many matches in the Champions League, I don't know. But yeah, always seems to be that they do that. Personally, would have liked a bit of Bruges. That would be very nice. But like I say, got no issues with heading back to Milan. I think that'll be quite an interesting one. But we can kind of put that to the back of our minds for a bit. That is not until February, obviously. But yeah, Spurs in the last 16 of Champions League, as I said last week, puts a nice little bit of pressure on that January transfer window, I think, in a good way. To face AC Milan, Spurs will need some better players to come in the door as well, and hopefully that happens. So, right, let's absolutely bury ourselves within this Spurs-Liverpool game, which was, yeah, it was so frustrating because it did have plenty of positives. It had fight, it had attacking endeavour. I saw some people I just put a little image on Instagram earlier today, and within the comments I could see a couple of people say, the football's so rubbish. I didn't think the football was rubbish yesterday. I didn't. There was a little period near the start of the game where once again the Spurs came out of the trap so slowly, but I actually felt that a lot of the football was quite good. They were really trying to use the flanks, well, especially the left-hand side, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. And there was attacking endeavour, and they were trying to sweep up the pitch. And I didn't think it was one of those where the first half was rubbish, second half was good. I actually felt that there was quite a spell in the first half where Spurs were quite good, especially after the first goal. And then I felt, obviously, utterly ridiculous mistake from Eric Dier, and they kind of put themselves in all kinds of problems again. But I didn't actually feel it was as clear-cut as first half rubbish, second half good, because I did feel that actually Spurs over a longer period of this game played well. And I think that's maybe what makes it even more frustrating. But of course, it has to go into the category of Spurs only improving after a setback. It has to go in there because they didn't start well. They didn't start with the intensity that you need in a game like this, that is a huge failing. I don't know where it's coming from, and the fact that it's still happening, it is really worrying. I mean, just look at the fact that Spurs have conceded the first goal in the first half for their last 6 games in a row, past 6 matches in a row. And that's a big problem. And the problem that obviously brings is that if you're only going to kick into gear when something negative happens to you, you often, or you can, run the risk of leaving yourself with too big a hole to climb your way out of. And obviously we've seen that against Newcastle, and so it proved to be yesterday against Liverpool. Despite however well you can play afterwards, if you're just constantly trying to come from behind to win games... Harry Kane had a kind of a moan about it at the end yesterday. I've got his quotes later on, and he's absolutely spot on. It's something that shouldn't continue to be happening, and it's something that this break that Spurs have got, it needs to be figured out, because it is so frustrating, and it is what leads to things like the boos at half-time, which we'll talk about again later as well, because there's some interesting debate to be had on that, I think is the way to put it. With Antonio Conte kind of having his say on that. And I know it's been something that's been bubbling underneath the scenes, behind the scenes a little bit with Conte. And I think he kind of finally decided to vent yesterday. It's an interesting one, because I can definitely see from both sides in that scenario. But we'll have a proper chat about the fans booing and support and all this sort of stuff a little bit later. But yeah, like I said, I didn't think it was a poor first half. I thought it was a slow start. I thought the Mohamed Salah goal on, was it only 11 minutes in, was poor, as in poor from Spurs' perspective. To have left, Núñez had so much space. Salah, last year's joint top scorer with Sonny, so much space. That in itself is ridiculous. Obviously, they burst down their left, Tottenham's right, far too easily. And then, just the ball, it was just like a square pass to Salah from Núñez. Longley had made a bit of a fluff of he kind of tried to come across to cut out a ball that wasn't really happening, then left himself out. Davies was well over as well. He'd come across. So you ended up having these three central defenders all standing essentially on, for them, what is the right side of the Spurs box from a Spurs perspective. And that left Ryan Sessegnon having to try and come across and slide in, obviously too late to stop Salah. It was just an absolute bodge job of defending. And I kind of said after the game that there were two gifts of goals or mistakes, whatever. I can't remember the way I said it. And someone said, well, the first one wasn't. And it was like, it really was. It was an utter gift. It didn't really sit with a lot of the defending that Spurs... And again, the frustrating thing. I actually felt that Spurs defending on the day, other than that one moment, and then Dier's obviously daft attempt at a header, the actual defending I thought was quite well. Liverpool were quite nullified, other than the early save Lloris had to make from Núñez, his half volley. I'm trying to remember if Lloris had to make a single save in the second half. I don't think he did. Spurs kind of kept them out. And yes, you could argue, of course, that Liverpool may well have gone down the gears, but I don't know. I did feel that Liverpool were just penned in. And when they did break, Spurs dealt well with it, whether it be in the midfield with Bissouma, who I did feel had his best game in a Spurs shirt so far, and we'll talk about him, but also defence. But it's like, it's all for nothing. If you're going to defend well for, let's say, 89 minutes of a match, but in 2 different minutes you're going to make silly mistakes, it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter what you've done in the rest of the game. And that's the most frustrating thing about it. Because Spurs then had plenty of chances to put Liverpool away. Enough chances that maybe could have won the game, let alone grabbed a point. Obviously hit the woodwork in both halves. Had a very strong penalty shout turned down. I still keep looking at that and wondering how that wasn't viewed that little bit more difficulty, more clinically, I guess, is the way to look at it. But I think it was what I said. Someone said it. It was one of those where, had it been given, I don't think VAR would have taken it off either. It was a strange one, because for me it was a push on Sessegnon from Alexander-Arnold. And a similar one happened outside the box. I can't remember if it was to Cess or Perisic. And a free kick was given. Like, was it still first half? I was trying to remember what it was. But it was like, that's the same foul you've just done in the box, but it's okay to do it outside the box, which kind of makes a mockery of the whole point. It's like, oh, but... And people do say that, anywhere else on the pitch, that would be a foul, blah, blah, blah. But when you actually see it in practice, it's a bit like, ugh. I think it's one of those where if you're the defending team, you probably moan that it would be soft. If you're the attacking team, you moan that it should be given. But I think probably certainly an objective person. I saw a lot of that from more objective people making their comments on it, and I think the pundits were as well. I don't know if from what I was told, I obviously didn't see the TV footage because I was there. But from what I understand, certainly the pundits seem to believe it was a penalty as well. And obviously they're going to be objective about it. Strange one. So they hit the woodwork twice. Penalty shout turned down. And I think it's fair to say Alisson was the busier of the two goalkeepers. But I still think he could have been tested more. I think Spurs had something like 14 shots at goal. And only, I think it was 5 or 6 on target. I think they could have put more on target. You know, the two that hit the woodwork... for me, Perisic, I think probably should have done better with the second one, cut back from Sessegnon. And I also think he actually should have done better with the first one because I looked at the replay, and unless I'm mistaken, I don't think he actually gets a touch on it. I think Kane crosses the ball in. Perisic doesn't quite get there, which actually confuses Alisson. And then the ball hits Alisson, bounces backwards, hits the post and goes away. Look, before... this is not going to be one of those videos where all is doom and gloom, because ultimately, I will say it again, and I did predict it. Although it's quite an easy prediction, so I'm not really going to take any crown and run around celebrating. But Spurs will head into the world break in the top 4. They will turn into the World Cup break in that top 4, barring a miraculously ridiculous goal swing in the Spurs match against Leeds. And I think Man U are going to Fulham. It would have to be an incredible goal swing. We may be talking about this next week, and me saying, ooh, but I can't see that happening. And they go into it in the top 4. They go into it this last 16 match against AC Milan, and they are in a good position. They are. We know it's not right yet. We know it's not clicking. But again, top 4 and last 16 in Champions League. So it's a really awkward one because we can all see where the problems lie and what needs to happen and what needs to be upgraded. But on the flip side, we're not talking about a mid-table team. We're not talking about a team that is really, really, really struggling. Because even when the AC Milan draw came, I saw people say, "Oh, that's it, we're stuffed, we're done." And it's a bit like, are they? It's like I think we like to be how do we put this? Not defeatist, I suppose that's one aspect, but that's just being a football fan. But I think we maybe, myself included, like to, I guess, go overboard. Even yesterday, ahead of the game, I didn't really hold out much hope for Spurs, I'll be honest. Before the game, I kind of felt that just this was one of those games where Liverpool were going to really turn up and the Spurs were going to do something daft. But as it were, they did do something daft, but actually gave him a really good game, and that's kind of was a common theme last year as well. Again, I'll use the expression that I think Spurs have got a foundation to build upon now, and it's down to them during this winter break whether they build on it or not. That's the key thing. Conte was a little bit of a joke with me, but without smiling at the start of the presser. He asked me a question which was really awkward because I kind of thought it was a rhetorical question, and I realised he actually wanted me to answer. He'd obviously, if you remember, Jurgen Klopp, after the 1-1 draw at Anfield, was quite dismissive of Spurs' style of play under Conte and said, it's not something that I would ever coach. He said that to Charlie Eccleshare, I remember. Charlie asked about, was he impressed with Spurs defending? He was not. Narrator's voice says. And so, Conte didn't really bite the other day pre-match when he was talking about that. He was asked about Klopp's comments, and he said pre-match, I understand why he did, because, essentially Liverpool lost the title that night, and Spurs really got a point that ended up being one that helped them into the top 4. So it was kind of explaining the context for him. But he was ready to have a go after the game, and so I asked my question. It was just a general, it's another not so great start, and then another positive reaction. But essentially, how much more can you keep doing that? I guess was the question. And he said, I've got the quote here. What did he say? He said, before I answer the question, Jurgen was happy with the way that we played tonight. And I kind of was like, oh, and everybody remembered, oh, and I was like, oh, you know that moment when you realise, oh, he actually does want me to answer. And the thing is Klopp hadn't really said anything in his press conference that signified whether he was happy or not with the way Tottenham played. So I was a bit like, what do I do now? Do I kind of just go? So I kind of went to him, well, I think so, like that. And he went, yeah. Well, it's important to know his opinion. Jurgen's a really good coach, but at the end tonight, we're talking about a defeat, and I'm happy with the game that we played at Anfield. The final result was 1-1, and it was better. So I get what he's saying. It's like, yeah, I'm sure he had no issues with the performance when his team got all 3 points. And it's true. It's true. But easily, like I say today, Spurs could have played with that little bit more attacking nature about them, and they could have won the game. But I still maintain 100% that the Conte system in itself is not a defensive system. It just relies on the right people in the right roles. And I will say that until, honestly, they're going to find me just kind of mumbling to myself in a corner one day going, system not defensive, needs right people, right roles, right like Red Rum from The Shining. That's what they're going to find me doing one day, going mad, because that's how I see it. But I get it. When it doesn't work and the manager is playing sometimes the wrong people in those wrong roles, or head coach is, I get it, because people will then say this is dull, boring football. But again, I think yesterday proved, especially when the players were right on that pitch, especially on the right, that Spurs could create a lot. Even Perisic put 14 crosses into the Spurs box. We'll talk about Perisic later, but 14 crosses. That's into not Spurs box, into Liverpool box. That's not the sign of a team that is not getting forward and doing stuff. Like I say, 14 shots on goal. It's not a dull, boring attempt. It's not like, they had the handbrake taken off because they went behind. That was the plan from the start. They just don't execute things from the start, and that's probably the most frustrating thing of all. And again, we've got to kind of obviously put in there as well that, they didn't have Sonny, didn't have Christian Romero. Kulusevski and Lucas couldn't start. They came on later in the game. With Sonny, it hopefully looks to be good news from what Conte was saying after the game, that he's had his surgery, out of hospital, back home, and Conte said he's confident that he'll play at the World Cup. So that's lovely. I saw an interview with him pre-match where, I don't know what was done on the Friday, but he seemed to be indicating that there was no chance of Sonny being able to play any of the last 3 games for Spurs. I know there's been some little kind of rumours, will he maybe be back for Leeds with a mask? I don't know. Certainly, Conte said in this interview, I think it was a Sky one ahead of the game, that there was absolutely no chance of Sonny playing in any of the remaining games. It's one of those. But I think the timing of Kulusevski coming back, and Richarlison looks to be quite close. Richarlison was down on the sideline before the game, in essentially like a warm-up kit, but albeit with socks and trainers on. So it looked like he'd been doing something, because the players have got like a gym fitness area within the stadium, which they'll go in and do little warm-ups and stuff before games. So whether he was in there and then came out to watch the warm-up, because I went out quite late to the warm-up, so I missed the start. So whether he'd been doing any of those like half a pitch runs that Kulusevski was doing at Bournemouth, I don't know. If anyone was there and saw that, please do let me know. But certainly he wasn't. In previous games, we've seen him there by the sideline dressed in like a hoodie and a big jacket kind of thing. Clearly not playing any part in anything, but he looked like he'd been doing some kind of fitness work. So I think there is the hope that they might be able to get him back for maybe one of these games, if not both. But much will depend, I guess, on the coming days and how his body reacts to stuff. So Conte's answer to the rest of my question, or my actual question. I'm going to do a bit of story time with Conte here. About the performance, I have to be happy. I have to consider the whole game. And you asked me about the first half, and it was a positive first half. And then for sure, if you say, but your team was 2-0 down, that's true. But I think also in the first half, the attitude was we were prepared to put pressure high, and we conceded the second goal for this reason. Because we put a lot of pressure, a long ball, and when you do that, the risk for defenders is big. I think Eric was unlucky in the situation. Also, in the first half, we create chances. We hit the post. We had the chances to score. We played an open game because we wanted to create difficulties for Liverpool, but we were 2-0 down in the end of the first half. In the dressing room, I can tell you that I didn't say anything negative to my players. I said we have to continue this way. We are 2-0 down, but we have to continue to do what we prepared with the right intensity to move the ball more quickly, to move it from one side to the other side. You know what I mean? What he means. To create more problems. I knew that with the wing-backs we could create difficulties for Liverpool. Then in the second half we scored, hit the crossbar. I think Alisson was the best player for Liverpool. There is disappointment for the final result, but at the same time we have to take this example for my players because despite the difficulty to play without many important players, we showed that we can play good football and we could have got a good result against a team like Liverpool who in the last few years have dominated in the Premier League and the Champions League. So a couple of points on that. He actually took my question a little bit. He got a little bit annoyed because I think he slightly misheard me. I think he thought I was saying they had a bad first half. Maybe that's, excuse me, what had been asked in the previous radio and TV interviews. But I didn't actually say that. I said poor start. But yeah, the rest of what he said, well, the Eric Dier bit we'll talk about when we have a little chat about Eric Dier. I don't agree with Conte on what he said about Dier. And I do agree that the plan was to create problems with the wing-backs. My argument would be, did he pick the right wing-back? Certainly the one on the right-hand side. Conte actually himself got a yellow card as well. I almost forgot about that. It was quite a bizarre moment in that the ball went off. I think it was Robertson came over to take a throw. Spurs are frantically looking for a ball to give him because it's obviously a multi-ball system. Stellini hands him a ball. Then the actual ball that rolled out had gone to the Liverpool assistant manager. And Conte noticed this, charged over to the Liverpool technical area and slapped the ball out of the assistant manager's hand. And he was just left like, looking at it. It was as if to say, don't you hold that ball and time waste when we're all looking at it. Let's get on with the other ball. And it was like, it got a yellow card because you shouldn't really charge into the other technical area. Yeah. He was back to, I think he was making up for the fact that he was in the stands in Marseille. He was a live wire for much of the game. And when that Kane goal went in, he celebrated like big time. I thought he was going to start a kind of an argument with the Liverpool bench because of the way he celebrated that. But as it was only a couple of moments later, he's slapping that ball out of their hand. But yeah, Conte. He's an interesting chap. Actually, let's talk about Eric Dier now. It seems as good a time as any because it was so frustrating, that second goal. Because, like I say, Spurs had a good spell. They looked to be putting the pressure on to Liverpool. They hit the crossbar before that, didn't they, with Kane's cross. They had a penalty shout. And then for me, Conte's giving the excuse of saying, but they were pressed so high up the pitch. And, it added that element of risk for the centre-backs. And yes, people have pointed out Dier's in not his normal positions on the right of the back three rather than the centre, so maybe he wouldn't normally have been dealing with that. I don't think any of that matters. I don't. I think that it was a basic defender's thing to deal with. A lofted ball, Alisson boots the ball up the pitch. That is bread and butter for a central defender. I'm sorry, it is. Either you head that ball back up the pitch, or if you're trying to do what Dier does, you head it back to the goalkeeper. I would say, at the time, I did think it's a risky thing to do in the first place, with Salah kind of buzzing around anyway, but still, it's a header that, most times a decent centre-back is going to head that back to the goalkeeper. You just cushion it, don't you? He made a complete and utter mess of it. It kind of hit somewhere like on his shoulder, his head. It was like it was awful. It was one of those moments where concentration has switched off. Maybe he's seen Salah out the corner of his eye, I don't know. But he's taken his eye off the ball and he just hasn't headed it. And that's when you're going to get punished because of all the places for it to drop. It drops to Salah, runs through it. It was a lovely finish. Lovely little dinked kind of chip over Lloris as he came out. And this, for me, is my biggest gripe with Eric Dier, is that look, he's getting slated after the game on social media. Of course he was going to. It's going to be the way. Eric Dier is one of those players who, how do I put this? I think I said this in my article last game. He's got the building blocks for me to be a top defender. I do think he has. There's going to be people listening to this going, what are you talking about? He's rubbish and all this sort of stuff. But I don't agree. I do think he's got the building blocks to be a top defender. I think they're all there. Maybe missing pace. It's probably the one thing he's missing. But some of the best defenders out there, they aren't blessed with pace anyway. I do think there's a lot to his game, especially in a back three. I think he could be a real kind of libero type in that defence. And I do feel that he's become slightly more consistent. I thought last season, overall, you take last season as a whole, and I think Eric Dier had a good season. Probably his best as a centre-back for me. Because I used to think he was a really good defensive midfielder in the Poch's second year, alongside Dembele. I thought he was excellent. But as a centre-back, I thought last year was his best one. My main problem, and I think this is the obstacle that prevents Eric Dier going from a good Premier League defender to a top defender, is that concentration. Because, you've heard me speak before about Davinson Sanchez maybe has a mistake a game in him as well. I do feel like Eric Dier doesn't maybe have a mistake a game, but I feel he's got one maybe every other game in him. And it depends on how costly that will be. And it's always a moment where either he switches off or he decides to do something that is out of his remit and he leaves himself exposed. It was quite interesting because I was talking to Conte before the game about Rodrigo Bentancur, and he was really good on Rodrigo Bentancur. Other than saying the one problem with Bentancur is that just having that will and desire to be the very best because he can be. He also said it's easy to step up from being like an average player to a good player, but the gap between being a good player and a top player is the most difficult one to make in the game. And that's why so few do it. And I kind of feel you can apply that to Eric Dier. Because for me, look, you can say what I've said about he's got the building blocks to be a top player. You can say, Alistair Gold, what do you know, you muppet? But then I will gather around me Mauricio Pochettino, Jose Mourinho, and Antonio Conte. They all used him heavily and said exactly the same thing. He's played 339 times for Tottenham, Eric Dier. A lot of times. And all three of those managers who have been around, have managed some of the best teams in the world, played a lot of football, won trophies. You can add Poch in that now. He's won trophies. And all of them have said he certainly could be one of the best Premier League defenders. And Conte this season has said he could be one of the world's best, Eric Dier. So it's not just me kind of coming out with this rubbish. There are top, properly qualified people out there that are saying this guy's got it to be that top player. But I still don't think Eric Dier has made that jump to realise what they're saying. And at 28... he's approaching his prime. Is it too late for him to make that jump? I don't think so. But does it grow ever increasingly unlikely when he makes these silly little mistakes still? And look, straight off, Spurs miss him when he's not in the team. This is true. As much as we, as much as we can kind of say this and that about him, and maybe he needs to be upgraded, all this sort of stuff in the squad. I'm not sure about upgraded. For me, I think he needs more competition. I think that's what he needs. He needs to have someone else that pushes him and means he's not a guaranteed starter. Because everyone needs that for me. Even Harry Kane and Sonny and people like that. And I do think that with Dier, it's making that jump up to realise the games. Because you look at him and those mistakes, it could be a daft decision he makes. It could be a misjudgment of a pass that he sends straight to the opposition. It could be a sliced clearance or a missed clearance. It could be losing a man who's made a run, or just failing to anticipate a dangerous situation. And look, don't get me wrong, all players make mistakes. Of course they do. But obviously the very best, especially at centre-backs, iron the majority out of their game. That's what they have to do. They're the ones that are eights every week kind of thing at the back. And I just don't think Dier's there. And I suppose the key is to look at it and say, would Eric Dier be a regular starter for any of the big boys, any of the big teams in the Premier League? It's difficult to argue that case. Even with England, look, I think his exclusion from the Southgate squad was a strange one because of the alternatives being chosen. But I wouldn't say the whole country was clamouring for, Eric Dier to be in that England lineup. That what he did for that second goal, unfortunately, that kind of sums up, I think, why he hasn't made that next step up. And honestly, I must keep going back to last season. He was so good last season. I felt consistently was much, much better. There were still mistakes, but I felt as a whole it was a good season. I looked back at my season player ratings and I gave him an 8.5 out of 10 because I felt that he actually had a really good season across it. But has he made that step up to be one of the best? Has he made up that step to be a player that all of those top Premier League sides would love to take off of Tottenham's hands? I don't think he has. And that's why I think he needs that competition. He needs someone else. Lenglet's making a claim, I guess, in a way at the moment for being able to play in the centre as well. But I don't think he's the natural competitor for Dier still. I don't think Conte sees him as that. I like Eric Dier. I think he's a very intelligent chap. And I do think he's got the ability. It's just mentally, has he got the... I guess mentally has he got the ability to remain switched on throughout? We'll see. Because after that, he was actually quite good. That's the annoying thing as well, is that a lot of what he did after that was very good. He got up the right-hand side a lot, really well. Put a few good crosses in, had a header at goal that Alisson saved. And his use of the ball was really good. It's a bit like an NFL quarterback who's like pinging it around. And I actually do feel that he's fine on the right of the back three. Obviously, he's played at right back before. And I do think the position when Romero's out, I do think he's probably better there than playing someone like a Davinson Sanchez who maybe doesn't fit the role as well. Eric Dier. And this is the problem, I think. For all the good stuff he did, he'd already blotted his copybook. And that's what I'm saying earlier. You make one mistake as a defender or a goalkeeper, it almost doesn't really make any difference to what you do next. Like a striker can miss a penalty, but then he can go off and score a hat-trick. Whereas a defender can never really rub out the fact that they've made a mistake that's cost a goal. It's a really difficult one. Other players can kind of bail them out, or I guess they could score at the other end themselves, but ultimately, as a defender, that's what you remember, not getting the clean sheet. And interestingly, Kane, in his interview with Spurs Play afterwards, went in quite hard on, and understandably and rightly so, on the mistakes that Spurs are making in first halves and against big teams. He said, unfortunately, the damage was done in the first half. In key moments in big games, we've made too many mistakes this season against the bigger teams and been punished for it. That was the case again today. I think when we look back over the season, we need to reduce those errors, especially when you're playing against the best teams, and try to cut it out of our game. We weren't good enough being 2-0 down at half-time. It's happened too often this season, being behind and having to chase the game in the second half. We've done great doing that, as in chasing the game, and we've come back in a lot of games and we've pushed teams to the end. But I think if you really want to be fighting at the top of the league, you have to fight in those big moments and make sure we come out on top in these type of games, and we just haven't done that. Spot on. Can't argue with that. Absolutely right. He's not directly, obviously, saying Eric Dier there, but he's obviously pointing out that it was a big mistake against a big team, and can't happen. It really can't happen. But it wasn't just about Eric Dier. I felt other negatives, definitely differing aspects of the two starting wing backs. They were differing and dithering. They were, how to describe that? I mean, they kind of did. They had very different displays for me, but ultimately both kind of ended up with the same end product. So, Emerson Royal, he made one straight off with a positive. He made one very good pass to Kane with his left foot, which put him through. I think it was for the cross, wasn't it? That led to the post being hit. I think it was that one. But that was kind of it for me from Emerson. Similar performance to pretty much every Emerson performance we see. Reasonable in defence, although, like I say, a few issues down that right with Darwin Núñez to begin with. but just offers nothing in that final third. And I think it said a lot that before he went off Emerson, Eric Dier, the centre-back, offered more going forward and down the right flank than Emerson did. And that can't happen. that means it's wrong. If the centre-back is the more attacking, like Ben Davies we know can get up the left and put in the cross, but if he's going to be more effective, dangerous than, say, Sessegnon or Perisic, whoever's playing on the left, then the wing-back's not doing their job, or they're not right for that job. And unfortunately, it's the case with Emerson Royal. And I don't like to pile on the player because I don't think he's a bad player. I just think he's a player being played out of position, and unnecessarily so. He just doesn't know what to do when the ball's at his feet and he's approaching the opposition box. You just kind of see him, and you see his brain going, "Oh, what do I do?" And his best kind of moments are when he just simply lays off the ball. So that's why I think he worked a little better with Kulusevski, because with Kulusevski, he could just say, "There you go, there's the ball, crack on." And just move and get on with it. Whereas Conte's wing-backs need to be more than that. They really, really do. I think the one time he got into a crossing position, decent one, he wildly overhit it, nowhere near any of the Spurs attackers. And when Conte needs his wing-backs to be like an auxiliary striker, auxiliary winger, as well as defending, you just can't have a player that absolutely hits a brick wall every time he gets to just over the halfway line, pretty much. Again, I must stress, I don't think Emerson's a bad player. I've seen people saying he's the worst signing Spurs ever made. No, I think as a full-back, I think he'd be absolutely solid and fine. As a wing-back, just no. And I think the improvement when Matt Doherty came on, rekindling that partnership with Kulusevski, that was a really good partnership towards the end of last season before Doherty's injury, I think you could just see the improvement was marked. As soon as he came on, suddenly Spurs had a threat down the right, and it wasn't just coming from the left, and Liverpool were a bit like, we don't know what to do. Whereas when Emerson is always going to do a certain thing, stop, turn inside, find someone to pass to, opposition teams know, okay, right, fantastic. Well, we know the right-hand side nothing's coming from, so let's look to the other side. And that kind of, with Ryan Sessegnon on the other side, was an utterly different frustration for me, because I actually felt he promised so much more than Emerson. He had his movement was excellent, Sessegnon, yesterday. His first touch a lot of the time, taking balls down from the sky, was fantastic. Unfortunately, he just really showed his age at times with some of the decision-making after that in the final third. And he's 22. Was it Emerson 23? It's a difficult one, because I can say on one hand I still feel Sessegnon's got a lot of kind of growing and improving to do, and people could say, well, Emerson's only a year older. But again, when I go back to that expression building blocks, which seems to be a phrase I'm using a lot in this video, I feel like Sessegnon has the building blocks to work with and Emerson doesn't. I don't feel he has the building blocks to play in a role that he doesn't suit, whereas I still feel for Sessegnon, wing-back is the role that gets the best of both worlds out of Ryan Sessegnon. And look, like I say, he did have some good moments. One of them, obviously, the penalty was a good example. He gets him behind, Perisic plays him in, and he's pushed over. Then he got him behind, didn't he, in the second half really well, and knocked the first-time ball back to Perisic, which Perisic then slammed against the crossbar. It was... He did a lot of good things. I do feel he did, but unfortunately there's just other times when he'll pick the wrong pass, or he'll run but without a kind of direction. He ends up almost running into a cul-de-sac and into a kind of a group of players. And I think it's just a part of his game that needs to improve. And I think the fact that Conte really likes Sessegnon, and I think that's because his natural instinct is to attack, and he attacks that space. And he also has a tactical understanding to defend against the top teams. Honestly, said it before, but I'll say it again, and it was proved again by his selection yesterday. You look at the top teams when Spurs have played them, and pretty much always Conte picks Sessegnon because he trusts tactically that he can do well enough. And I don't think he did that badly at all, defending-wise. I'm trying to think back to many mistakes he made at the back. I don't think he really did. He dealt quite well with everything that kind of came down that side. And obviously it was Alexander-Arnold. I felt he almost gave Alexander-Arnold more problems at the other end than he did for him. And look, I think the one thing I do feel that Sessegnon misses in his game his aggression and confidence in his body. Look, we all know it comes from the hamstring issues of the past. There are definitely times when I watch him, I'm like, go on, Sess. Obviously, I can't say that in the press box, but in my head, I'm thinking that. And there's times when you really think, oh, go at him. And you just see he has that, where it's a subconscious thing, he has that little hesitation on really, do I open up my legs and run at him? Or am I going to pop a hamstring again? And I think until he can get over that and have a sustained period without any problems, we're in November. He's kind of getting there at the moment, hopefully. And the aggression. I'd like to see him really going at other players as well when he's on the ball as well. Try and use that body strength and everything. I don't know what I'm doing, a little acting it out there. But we saw Sessegnon as a teenager and he would fly down the flank at everything. And he was such a danger. Obviously, was it 16 goals for Fulham in the year they came up? So we know he can do it. I don't like it when I see people saying he's not good enough for Tottenham, all of this. He's not good enough for the level. I think he can be. And again, if Conte sees that in him, then clearly it's there. Whether I believe it or not, if Conte sees it, it's there. Let's see what happens with Ryan Sessegnon. I do think Perisic is going to be a great mentor for him. Scored a couple of goals this season. And I think he'll continue to develop. Another one that, it'll be interesting to see, with Chilwell's injury, if he does start another game or two, does Southgate consider him as an outside bet maybe to go along as well? He often looks to the under-21s. Maybe there's others maybe that could get in there ahead of him, but if he goes, could be a good experience, big confidence boost for him. If he doesn't go, then I think equally working with Conte over the winter is going to be a big thing for him as well. And then there's Jed Spence. Still awaits his first start for Tottenham Hotspur. I'm almost bored of saying how much I think Jed Spence would suit what Conte wants on the right-hand side. My fear now is that I kind of felt like it was heading to a point where he was quite likely to start against Forest. But now I think because Doherty hasn't been starting recently and Emerson has, I kind of almost feel like Conte is going to reward or feel that Doherty needs to start. I guess the only way that Spence maybe starts is if Conte has already promised him that in some form, or he's looking at it and thinking, I might go for Matt Doherty against Leeds now. So do I really want to bring him in, play him on Wednesday, Saturday, or do I give Spence a go, maybe bring Doherty or Emerson on for the end of the game against Forest, and then start Doherty against Leeds? We'll see. But again, he's another one who the winter will be a big thing for him, and working with Conte and seeing where they're at. Just Spence, honestly. It is like banging a drum, isn't it? Look, Conte sees him in training every day and he knows what you can do, and he must be seeing something that I'm not aware of, but I just don't even understand why he's not being moved into the cycle of who's playing more. I don't get it. But there you go. I'm not the manager. Keep picking Emerson Royale if you want. Please don't. That's harsh. That's harsh on Emerson Royale. Let's talk about positive things. Let's move on to positives. Dejan Kulusevski. He was back. Real buzz when he came there. He was came up to do a warm-up in the second half. I don't think he did any in the first half, but in the second half, because Conte said before the game he was only probably going to do 10, 20, maybe 30 minutes at a push. So second half, he sent him to warm up, and you just feel the buzz among the crowd. And when he did eventually come on, I think it was about 22 minutes to go. I'm trying to remember how long it was. Maybe 28 minutes to go, perhaps. You could just feel it. The whole stadium lifted, and the players on the pitch lifted as well. It was a real shot in the arm for them, because they suddenly had a guy that could create. I didn't even realise he's missed 11 matches with this injury. I didn't realise how many he's missed. And I think if you ever needed proof of how important Dejan Kulusevski is to that Tottenham team, he had an assist in 2 minutes. He came on and had an assist. And it was that link up with Doherty. Doherty picked him out with a nice little kind of diagonal ball. Kulusevski just instinctively looked straight up, sees Kane's run, plays it into his path. Kane doesn't have to do anything other than pop it into the bottom corner. Lovely finish, but the ball to him was perfectly weighted. And for Kane, that was his 11th goal in 14 Premier League games. But for Kulusevski, it was his 18th goal involvement in the 26 Premier League games since he's arrived. So that's 12 assists, 6 goals. And I said it before, Conte does not have another Dejan Kulusevski. That's probably for me, his biggest failing, biggest inadequacy in the Tottenham squad. I really think it is. Because I think a lot of these recent games, you had a Kulusevski in there or someone that's like him. I don't think Spurs lose those games or they win them quite comfortably. And it changes the whole dynamic of what they do going forward as well. He's such a good player. He really, really is. Probably the only player who provides a similar kind of ability to create is Kane. But you want Kane on the end of these things. You don't want him dropping deep. Honestly, Kane, the moment he saw Kulusevski was about to come on, probably his face lit up, I'd imagine, thinking, yes, I'm going to get proper quality coming from the right-hand side now into my path. And he's just got this ability, Kulusevski, to carry the ball, dribble up the pitch, use his strength. That helps Spurs when they're under pressure, and it stops them doing those needless kind of kicks up the pitch that they do when they just give the ball away, which they did for a little spell towards the start against Liverpool. And Conte was asked afterwards, were you happy to see him back, as the fans were very happy to see him back, about Kulusevski. Conte said the fans were happy, but I was the first to be happy. Kulusevski, he missed a lot, and Lucas Moura missed a lot. Richarlison is missing a lot. Now we've lost Sonny. When a club like Tottenham loses all these important players, it's not like the other clubs. I hear someone say every team has injuries. Yes, but it depends which players you have injured. Tottenham cannot afford to lose all these important players. He's right. He is right in terms of Romero. You're probably losing your best defender, although he hasn't obviously been top of his game recently. He is probably the best defender in that back three. Sonny obviously is a world-class attacker. Kulusevski for me is swiftly becoming a world-class attacker, and Richarlison was the alternative up front. I think he's a very, very good player who hopefully will continue to improve and develop at Spurs. And he offers something more from the bench. He can change things. He's got that intensity, that desire, that ability to change matches. And Lucas, to a degree, when Lucas is really on kind of top form, he can be a game changer as well, especially from the bench. So, yes, I do agree that they're 4 big players for Spurs to have taken out of their kind of starting 11 options. I do agree with that. I think the key now with Kulusevski is juggling that game time. Does he play? Does he start against Forest? Is that too soon? Would you prefer him to start against Leeds and maybe just increase his game time against Forest? Maybe bring him on at half time or something like that, just to give him kind of improve him so that they don't kind of mess it up against Leeds. And then because Leeds, let's be honest, Leeds is probably the more important of the two. Although some might say, silver wise, is the Forest game the more important? It's an interesting question, actually. I don't know what I'd do. I'd probably give him more game time from the bench against Forest and then start him at Leeds. That's probably what I'd do. Otherwise it's a lot. Albeit he's young. He's probably got a very high fitness level as well. But if he was only able to play 10, 20, 30 minutes against Liverpool, then probably not going to be able to start both matches. But we'll see. Positive again, as I said at the start, is Basuma. I thought he was really, really good last night. I said that on Twitter and immediately someone said he was rubbish. I was like, I really don't think he was. I think he played really well. Again, I only use the Twitter things as joke things. I know we don't take what people on the whole on Twitter say seriously, but I always find it quite amusing when there's something that seems really clear and you just get someone saying completely opposite. He hasn't found his rhythm yet for Spurs, but for me, I do think this was probably, I think it was the best we've seen him in a Spurs shirt. He used the ball really, really well. He battled for everything. He kept getting his foot in really good little kind of nicking the ball away moments, like interceptions and just stopping Liverpool attacks, especially second half. He registered 2 tackles, 1 interception, 1 clearance, 1 blocked a shot as well. He showed really fast feet. There were lots of situations, a bit like the kind of Bentancur style, where he was given the ball in tight scenarios and he kind of worked his way out of it using his feet, and he was really good. Bentancur went on one brilliant run from his own box where he dribbled past three players, but unfortunately did lose at the end, so it kind of negated what had happened before. But it was incredible. But yeah, no, I was really pleased with Basuma. I thought it was a really, really impressive showing. Højbjerg was his usual kind of busy self, but less end product than he has had in the last couple of games, of course. Bentancur, I thought, was superb again. I did feel that again. I got his stats: 4 tackles, 1 interception. He was always providing an outlet for Spurs with his energy and his running. I think he had 4 dribbles to his name, which was higher than anyone else on the pitch. I thought he was superb again. He had a header that maybe should have got a bit more on, which the keeper saved, and he had that late one, didn't he, in the final moments where he just couldn't quite get his head on it. Kane flicked on a Perisic cross. But no, another really good one from Bentancur. He is, you can see, sometimes when you can see a player evolving into the top player. I think we're seeing that with Bentancur. We just hope he has an all right World Cup with no injuries. I mentioned Perisic cross there, and Perisic crosses, like I said earlier on, 14 crosses into the box in all. Only 4 found Spurs players, but that was a ridiculous. Honestly, I was looking down the stats, and no one got even near that in terms of crosses. I think the most were like maybe 4 or 5 from anyone. 14. He also played 5 key passes on the night, struck 3 shots at goal, 1 hitting the crossbar, obviously. It's good movement, actually. If you watch Perisic's movement for that hitting the crossbar, it kind of goes in, pulls back, cuts away, and Sessegnon sees him making the run. It was a really good move. The ball had gone in. That had been a lovely, lovely goal. And then, what was the other one? He almost got that. I think if he got that Kane cross in the first half, I think the ball goes in, rather than it hitting Alisson and then hitting the post. He gave Alexander Arnold a torrid time. Literally from the kickoff, Spurs ran up the pitch, and I was watching Perisic because he burst up the pitch. He wasn't on the ball. He just went up to Alexander Arnold. He essentially clattered it. Ironically, gave him a proper push, pushed him over, and ran on, ready for the ball. He was just up for it. He was really, really. I don't think he's one of those you cannot moan about his intensity. The whole game from the start, I thought he was absolutely up for it. Obviously, played in the front 2 with Kane for the bulk of the game, and I thought he actually did quite well in the role. I think he did present himself as a viable option up there, and then obviously switched back to wing back when Cess went off, and I thought he slotted back into that well, piled the crosses into the box, and I like Perisic. I do think he's got a lot to offer. I think it is, again, with him, it's a little bit about consistency. 33 years old, isn't he? So he's maybe not going to be able to maintain the same levels for every single game. But I think he's going to rack up those assists this season. I think he is going to be a superb free transfer. What else we got? Harry Kane. I think that we should probably mention him. Like I say, he's only failed to score in 4 of his 14 Premier League games this season. That's ridiculous. That really is. And I feel like we're seeing the level of his performances really increase as well. He's getting better and better as he goes on. With Bentancur, there was a little subplot that Kane and Bentancur both were on 4 yellow cards. So had either of them got a yellow card in this game, they'd have missed the Leeds match. With Premier League yellow card accumulations, it's not all domestic competitions. It would just be the Premier League. So they wouldn't have missed the game against Forest, they'd have missed Leeds. Be interesting to see now if either of them do pick up a yellow now in this Leeds game, thinking, it's miles away the next game, but actually will be really frustrating when Spurs come back. I think they've got to get to the end of the 19th Premier League match before the yellow cards get kind of scrubbed out and they start again, as it were. I thought Kane was good again. I don't think he could be put in the category of kind of poor players on the day or ones that had made real mistakes or anything. It was a lovely, lovely finish for his goal. He's now got 194 Premier League goals, so he's just 14 behind Wayne Rooney, second all time in the list of goal scorers in the Premier League. Kane's third. He's also now on 260 goals for Tottenham, so he's only 6 away from equaling the late great Jimmy Greaves as Spurs' all-time top goal scorer. And I like the fact that Kane was really disappointed after the game. He wasn't like going, oh, well, at least we played quite well. He was properly annoyed, and that's what you want to see. That's what the top players do. I think it's time to move on to the fans and the boos and Conte. Like I say, I think this has been something that's been bubbling underneath the surface a little bit. I think he has not been delighted with the frequency of the halftime boos. Although, look, you know what I'm like. I think the fans have got every right to boo if they want, because they pay their money, and it's not cheap to go to a Tottenham Hotspur game at all. I do think you've got the right, if you want to voice your disapproval, to do so. Do I think it's helpful? No, but I don't think that takes away the right to be able to do that. And Conte was quite interesting yesterday, because obviously he was in the press conference, but I also listened to his Spurs play interview after the game. And there were a couple of, in that one and in his press conference, a couple of thinly veiled kind of ultimatums, threats, hints, whatever word you want to use, kind of almost saying like, if you don't get behind me, maybe I won't want to stick around. I just kind of felt that in what he was saying. Look, the halftime boos have become a familiar refrain. We're used to it in the press box. We know they're coming. The Spurs aren't winning at the break, pretty much. We know they're coming. We'll often kind of say, oh, like when you're looking like, oh, at a time, counting down, when the boos are coming, there's the boos. You know, some fans will claim it's for different things. Some will say it's for the officials. Some will say it's to do with a mistake that was made. Some will say it's to do with a lack of effort, or whatever. Ultimately, it's the same noise. It's the same thing that happens at half time. Like I say, Spurs fans, all supporters, but especially I do think Spurs fans, pay a lot of money for a club, for tickets to watch a club that has not won anything in a long time. They really do. They're absolutely entitled to voice their disapproval, and 100% Spurs' first half showings on the whole this season have been far poorer than their second half showings. Spurs fans could maybe say, if the Spurs players are not showing the required intensity in the first half, then why should they? It's really awkward. It's like that chicken and the egg thing, isn't it? It's like, should the fans cheer on the team, or should the team give the fans something to cheer for? It's a really difficult kind of thing. The answer is probably both. It is probably both of them. But yeah, I do see it from both sides. You know, I guess the booing supporters might suggest that those improved second half displays are a result of them having their say at half time, as it were. My counter to that would be that we're seeing the same thing away from home. And the away fans, unless I missed it, they don't boo. It's just not part of what they do. You'll always hear me, going on and on about the away fans that travel everywhere with Spurs, because they are a remarkable bunch. They have to put up a lot of rubbish sometimes. But obviously they get the reward of seeing some amazing kind of things happening away from home as well. But I don't think I've heard them boo. I don't think. There may have been an occasion. There may have been. But on the whole, it seems to be a home thing with the home fans. And yeah, I mean, I'd say the halftime boo, the halftime whistle boo on Sunday. Oh, it's a difficult one. I'd say it was probably harsh on the players in terms of the endeavour and the intensity they tried to bring. I think they were undone by two stupid moments. Whether the whole team deserving of a boo for that, I don't know. Do you know what? I'd say, I don't know if I've got a huge problem with the boos at half-time at all. Like I say, I do think everyone's entitled to voice their frustration, especially when you're paying silly amount of pounds for tickets to watch Tottenham play. I'd say the ones that slightly, not annoy me, but I can see as more counterproductive are the ones in-game. So let's say, for instance, Eric Dier, after he made the mistake, it was really annoying, and I can understand that 100% and why fans were frustrated. But then a few moments later, he had a similar-ish scenario where he headed the ball back to Lloris, and there was a big sarcastic cheer. That's the stuff for me that I feel is even more counterproductive than a halftime boo. Because for me, in that moment, there's no benefit to Eric Dier. There's no benefit to your team. I get 100% it is a natural reaction to being frustrated at what happened before. But for me, in that moment, the only thing you're likely to do is make Dier, I guess, more worried, I suppose, whenever he has to head a ball. To be fair to him, I'd actually say Dier did respond quite well after his mistake. But there's other players that might be a bit more mentally fragile when they hear stuff like that. And then there's those, if you've been in the Spurs stadium, you'll have heard it. When, let's say, people that aren't fan favourites, the likes of Davinson Sanchez, Emerson Royale, if they make a mistake, very quickly there's a huge groan goes along around the stadium. And that can happen very quickly. I remember one with Big Dav. When did Davinson Sanchez get it? Oh, it was in a game not too long ago, and it was about 3-4 minutes into the game. And it just kind of set him up to fail for the rest of the game. Look, I'm not excusing whatever bad performances there might be, but if your own supporters are groaning at something you do, whether it's a slightly bobbly pass or a misplaced ball that goes out for a throw, within 3 or 4 minutes of the start, it's got to knock you in some way. It has. It really has. So, yeah, it's one of those where... and those fans might suggest don't put Sanchez in the team, don't put Emerson in the team if you're worried about them getting booed or groaned and things like that. It is a really difficult one because I understand where it comes from, and I understand that if I'm watching it on telly, naturally, if one of those things happen, I probably would go, oh, like that. And maybe just letting out that noise, but 60,000 people in unison doing that together is a different thing. So I understand it isn't something that can really probably prevent from happening because it's a natural reaction. But it's so difficult. It is, because I get it from both sides. I get it. Some of the first half stuff that has been served up this season has been poor. But I do wonder at times when you think, do fans from other clubs look at, say, Tottenham in 4th place in the last 16 of the Champions League and think, why are their fans booing? And it's an interesting scenario when you see what's happening at other clubs, and maybe those boos don't come. I don't know. There's two sides to it. I've seen some people saying on social media, the fans are so entitled. They believe they're this, they believe that. But then also there's the flip side to it when I do agree that people like Conte are calling for patience from the fans. The fans have shown a lot of patience over the years. It's a long time without any serious silverware at Tottenham Hotspur. They've shown a lot of patience. I get that as well. I'll tell you what, the best thing to do, I think, is to dive into Conte's quotes. Because, look, in an ideal world, everyone supports. There's no booing. There's no, it's not rocket science. If the fans are roaring on the team probably do play better. But then likewise, the fans need to kind of almost get something to make them want to roar. It is massively the chicken and the egg situation. So here's Conte's interview with Spurs player, which I thought was quite interesting. I think the fans played an important role in the second half. The fans have to understand that in every moment, especially in the difficult moments, they have to play with us. They have to understand that. I understand that the fans want to win and they want to win trophies. But at the same time, I have to be honest with the fans. We need to go through our process. And with our process, we need time and patience. If we have time and patience and we are all enthusiastic, then it will be good also to continue and to do it in the future. If we think that we are ready, we're already ready to win. So if we think that we are already ready to win, then I think it's not simple. I like to be honest, and for this reason, they have to stay close in every moment to our players, to our team, because the effort is a big effort we are doing, especially in this period. We don't have 4 important players, and to lose 4 important players is different for Tottenham compared to other teams. the top teams, because you feel this. We're trying to manage the situation in the best possible way, and sometimes you have to find the right balance. Tonight, the performance was really good. The players gave me everything on the pitch, and I think our fans appreciated that a lot, the effort that we did. I'm working with my staff and my players a lot. This is the only assurance that I can give in this moment to our fans. Then if you ask me to promise other situations, then only big work to do the best for this club, because this club deserves the best. And the key line in all of that was, if we have the time and patience and we are all enthusiastic, then it will be good also to continue and do it in the future. He is pretty much, and I've checked kind of with a few people in the club just to check I was reading this right, and they agreed. He is kind of suggesting that if the fans back him and his team and give him a reason to want to stick around, he will do so. But if they kind of are showing that they don't really want what's happening, then they might head off into the sunset, I guess. Some fans may want that. But I do feel like in his press conference, he went even stronger about the fact of how far he believes Spurs are right now, and it needs to kind of be a bit of a reality check. And look, no Spurs fan wants to hear that. No football fan wants to hear that. Let me read you some of the quotes from that, because he really kind of went into a little bit of a eulogy. Eulogy? Monologue is probably the best word for this. This was actually about those boos at half-time. I must say, if you listen to his words, it does sound like he's in for the journey. It does sound like he's on board. I'll give him that. So these are the quotes. First of all, I think that we have to show in every moment great respect for our fans, because they are our fans. They pay the ticket. Pay for the ticket. At the same time, if you ask me if I was a bit disappointed by the booing, yes. Yes, because it's important in every moment to be honest. I think I can continue to repeat always the same situation from the start of the season, and I say we have just started a process. I think after 1 year we made a lot of improvement. If someone thinks that we're already ready to win, I have to be honest with you and tell you it would be really, really difficult, because when you start, and Liverpool is a good example, when you start a process, you need time and patience. If we understand this, time and patience, everybody is okay. Otherwise, we can lose the passion and we can lose the enthusiasm. Again, a suggestion that if the fans don't show the patience, then neither will he. He said, then I repeat, I don't see another way for the way we're doing. For this reason, I want to be really honest. I can't promise in this moment to win trophies for our fans, because in this moment we are far to doing that. Then, if it happens in the domestic league, then it would be a super plus, because I repeat, I continue to ask for time and patience, because I have the experience to say that we are far from other teams that are used to winning, and those who have squads strong to win. If we understand this together, it would be good. Otherwise, I repeat, everybody wants to win. I'm the first that wants to win, but we need time and patience. If everybody knows we have time and patience, it is okay. Otherwise, I think we continue this season and we will see at the end what happens. And look, it isn't something that any fans want to hear. And for Spurs fans, they don't want to hear that they've got no chance of winning the title, even if they maybe believe that anyway. And they have needed to be very, very patient over decades now. But on the flip side, this is a statement that the likes of Poch used to come out with, Mourinho came out with. Before Conte said it, there was this kind of need to be, I guess, more realistic. And that was even coming from Poch when, let's be honest, he was actually fighting for that league title with Leicester and then Conte's Chelsea over back-to-back seasons. I think the question quite rightly needs to also be asked of, why have Spurs not pushed on since then? I think, a lot of issues with not being backed fully in the transfer market. I think a lot of issues of poor decisions being made off the pitch as well by the club's hierarchy, whether that be Daniel Levy, whether that be others on the board, I don't know. Obviously, Daniel Levy signs off on it all, so it must be. But yeah, when you look at it, I say that Poch is challenging for the title in 2 successive years, and then here we are, half a decade later, and Conte's saying they're nowhere near being able to do what they were doing then. Something's happened there. Why have they regressed to a point where they're not in that position? Conte also said, we finished the Champions League first in the group, and for many people that was normal. Despite last season in the Conference League, we dropped out of the group. So essentially he's saying, people are saying, Spurs should win that group anyway, whereas last year they couldn't even make it out of their Conference League group. I think we have to be calm and assess very well the situation of Tottenham and see what the situation was just 1 year ago. Otherwise, I repeat, we risk losing enthusiasm and passion. Again, saying it. We have to know that to stay in this position now, there is a project, there is a vision. The club knows very well the way to try to improve, but we have to be enthusiastic, everybody. Because for me, I don't find the passion and enthusiasm. Okay, we can work a lot, but for me, the passion and enthusiasm is my fuel. I need to have this. It's very, very important for me. So again, really heavily hinting that if he doesn't feel that the enthusiasm's there, what's the point? He's going to head off. Look, he's not directly saying that, but he kind of is, like an indirect statement. It's a big thing, and I guess it's a challenge to the fans. And is it the best time to challenge the fans when they're in that kind of mood anyway? It's a difficult one. It is. I'd be intrigued to know. I'd love to know everyone's opinions in the comments. Please do let me know underneath. Where do you see it? Do you feel it's a bit of both, or do you feel that the fans need to have a bit more patience for this process that Conte is going through? Or do you feel that Conte is being unfair? Is he asking for patience at a time when, the fans have already shown more than enough over the years? It is a really fascinating situation. And look, I don't think there's any debate that Spurs have progressed under Conte. I don't. Trust me. Having to do these videos a year ago, the mess they were in, farcical summer with the managerial search, ending up with Nuno, who declared he was going to make the fans proud, and he didn't. And I do think Conte kind of has. He took Spurs into the Champions League again. Just 7 months it took him to do that, into the top four. And yes, they haven't clicked this season, particularly missing Kulusevski for those 11 games. But once again, he's got Spurs in the top four. They're in the Champions League last 16. They topped their group. Whether it was, whether it was dominant and, the best possible way they could have done it or not, they still managed it. They got the job done. And I think he kind of made it clear early in the week as well that doesn't matter whether you're a guy that is used to winning everything like he is. You can't just parachute them in and expect them to kind of transform a team into something they're not, or not yet. And I think Mourinho said the same, to be fair. He was exactly the same. You can't just wave a magic wand over it all. Yeah. On the whole, he's getting results, I feel, despite some of the mixed performances. And I can only stress a million times that January is going to be so key. It is. He said it a million times now. Spurs know what they need to do in January. They know they need to make good signings. So that has to happen. If it doesn't, it's a huge failure on the club's part. Huge, huge failure. And there's only one direction that people can look. There isn't. He's made it clear. January is a difficult month. We know that. But there's no excuses if you're planning properly and you have different options for those targets. If you can't get the top one that you want, there will be a lot of potentials that they'll be looking at. He needs players that he can trust, I guess, for the present as well, not just players for the future. I'd be intrigued to see. Look, I don't think a January move is likely at all, but I am intrigued by what's happening with Alessandro Bastoni at Inter. You know the history. Spurs really wanted him as one of their top two centre-back targets in the summer. Gvardiol was the other, but obviously massively kind of priced out for him, and he didn't want to leave either. And you've got City and Chelsea also massively looking at him. I think he's probably maybe going to end up at Chelsea, maybe. But with Bastoni, obviously the player just really didn't want to leave Milan. He was very, very happy at Inter, and had no real intention of going, despite Spurs' kind of best efforts. Spurs were willing to pay the money, just the player was not looking to leave at all. But I have kind of been keeping an eye on what's been happening with him, and it's like he's only started 6 Serie A games this season. Been an unused sub in the last 3 of the last 4 games as well. It was unused sub against Juventus yesterday. They lost against Juventus. Inter lost 2-0 to Juventus. Although, to be fair, that's because he had the flu in the days before, so he wasn't kind of fully prepared to play. But it's there to see that he's not been starting every match for them at all. He's been coming on as a sub in a few ones, but like I say, just 6 starts. He's been starting most of the Champions League games, but only 6 in the Serie A. For a 23-year-old, there keeps being talk about him getting a new contract, but at the moment, he's still got the one that expires in 18 months' time, roughly. I do think January will be too difficult to prize him away. It's a little bit like I can see people saying, and I get it, like, James Maddison, let's bring him in January. It's the same with Bastoni. It's like, I don't think that's quite as easy as you say it is. It's not like a game of FIFA or Football Manager. It's like, in January, those kind of players are really, really, really difficult to kind of prize away from the clubs. They are summer deals. And I do wonder with Longley having that season-long deal, long loan with no option to buy, whether that is with Bastoni maybe in mind this next summer. But look, whoever comes in January, Conte needs new defensive and attacking recruits for me. They need to be able to push on. Like I said, Tanganga and Hill head off, whether it be on loan or not. I do hope it's a loan, especially for Hill, I think. Tanganga, maybe it's time for him to kind of get a new start in his career, perhaps. We'll see. He just needs to kind of leave behind his injury tag, I think, mostly. But yeah, they need to push on hugely in the winter window. Press conference tomorrow is actually going to be Christian Stellini again. Conte has clearly thought, hello, he can deal with that. And for the Carabao Cup, I don't think you have to have the head coach. So he has opted out of that. So we've got Stellini, which is good in a way, in terms of he might give us a fresh kind of take on certain things. We can ask him slightly different questions. So that'll be good. Doesn't speak for as long as Conte does, but he gets to the point. So that'll be good. Look, Conte keeps telling us he knows exactly what's required, and the club do as well. And that he's made it very clear repeatedly to them. But, I do think there's a point when he comes and talks about time and patience and he's asking the fans, I do still feel that the best way for him to show that to them is to sign any new deal that comes, or at least come out and say, I want to stay. I want to stay. Because it's a bit, at the moment, with someone of Conte's history, he's calling for the fans to show patience for a long-term process, but his history suggests he might not be around for that long-term process. So I do feel that he needs to show that he's in it for the long haul as well with them, and it's not just words. So, we'll see what happens on that front, but I do think that's something that probably needs to be addressed for everyone moving forward as well. And I do think Conte's words then hold a bit more weight to them. So there you go. Right, I'm going to head off now. That's quite a long video. Sorry for those who don't like the long videos. I do get the odd ones who want me to do little short videos, but I think I cover a lot. I think I do. I'm not sure I could have squeezed all of that into a short video, but there you go. I'm going to please everyone all the time. Right, head off now. And then, like I say, press conference tomorrow, and then heading to Forest for the Carabao Cup game. Intrigued to see what lineup he puts out. I would like to see some other players get a go. I'd like to see Brian Hill get a go. I'd like to see Jed Spence get a chance as well. I'd like to see Skippy ever start. And hopefully maybe see some players back from injury. That'd be nice as well. But there you go. Right, going to head off. As always, stay healthy, stay safe, look after yourselves, and I shall catch you later. Goodbye.